backdrop look good?
Yeah, you look great. Bam, meeting is now live on Facebook. We're here. Bam, Ward Wrestling Live. We're back with another absolute incredible wrestling mind in our country. It's Nova Wrestling Club coach, Jay LaValley. He's the founder of Joe Wrestling. He's got 1 million followers on IG, so check him out there. Chairman of Maryland USA Wrestling. He's partnered with Cliff Keen. He's the program director of BTS DC, which is Beat the Streets. I'm sure you all know. And man, we got him here today in the beautiful park in Virginia. So what's up, Coach, man? Thanks so much for coming on, man. I'm absolutely honored to have you. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks a lot for having me, Dan. I am really appreciate it, and I am honored as well.
Yeah, and first of all, Tanner Sewell, my apologies. I need to throw a Nova Wrestling Club thing back there. I finally found a logo last night, so we'll have to get one on there. So I'll get that done for you guys. But obviously, you know, first things first. And what's it like out there in Virginia right now? How has this kind of affected your off season, and what have you done to keep all your kids kind of mind strong and prepared for when this does open back up?
Yeah, great question. I'm sure it's different for everybody everywhere. And personally, I have not been on a wrestling mat. Well, I haven't been back at the wrestling room in 5 months. It's almost 5 months to the day. And it's been tough. You know, it's a struggle sometimes not being around the people you really want to be around, being sort of isolated and self-quarantined. And Northern Virginia is still under sort of the phase 2 or 3. I'm not even sure anymore, but we're still in that murky area where you're not supposed to have contact. You can be 6 feet away. You have to wear the mask, and it's pretty much mandated everywhere you go. And so for me, I've been doing a lot at my house in my basement. I have a pretty big space in my basement. It's almost 15 by 15. And I just recently picked up a home mat before I was doing it on my carpet. And surprised my knees had held up to that point. But I just got a wrestling mat. So I'm so grateful and thankful for the Friedmans who gave me the mat to use. And so I've been keeping my kids and my athletes, the Nova kids, my JO wrestling crowd, the Cliff Keen group, you know, those 3 pretty dynamic group, and just been doing a lot of technique and virtual workouts and instilling and really promoting the fact that, look, everybody is sort of in the same boat. They don't have access to everything that they want right now. And I'm telling my athletes, you have a chance, an opportunity to make big jumps right now. Get in the weight room, get outside running, get your plyometrics in, do your shadow wrestling. And that's all you really need to stay mentally sharp. And because I'm doing it right now, I told those guys, once we're back, I'm going to be back at another level. So
Exciting.
Yeah, that's been the gist of it. It's frustrating to say the least, because I see other areas of the country open back up and they're at it full tilt, no issues. And over here near DC, you know, we're in the political sphere of the world, and you know, it's just very different. So you kind of deal with that stuff too.
Yeah, I'd imagine. And you spoke about your basement. Is that where we see all those badass videos on IG?
The recent ones, at least. I was doing most of them in the Nova Wrestling Club. Thanks to those guys for letting me do them in there. But now that I have a wrestling mat, I can really, truly get back to recreating and giving athletes technique that they can do at their house. So it almost is coincidental that it works out that way. And my new goal is to get to 1,000 clips before October. So
oh, nice.
It averages about 20 clips 5 days a week, 20 clips 5 days a week, 100 a week for 9 weeks. And I thought to myself, I'm already sort of doing that in these workouts. So I just got to sort of formalize it and make them more crisp, more clean, and get in the limelight per se, you know, because it's very different than just going out and teaching.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, now you go to a room that's already got the kids there. You know, it's like door-to-door sales, or you're sitting in a showroom and people are coming to you.
Right.
Kind of
Right.
the same kind of aspect. And I mean, if you guys don't know, Jo Wrestling is it's on Instagram, it's on YouTube. You can find it in both those places. He's got a link in there that has his website. If you go to his website, right in the middle top, you'll see where it says click here to go to exercises and stuff like that. And you click right there, takes you right to his articles, his videos, his pages. Real simple. It's one scroll down. Pretty easy. Tells his story, what he came through. I'm sure we're going to hear it here next, but pretty simple to use, pretty easy to go through and kind of tag it. So feel free to hit him up. I think most people know about him on IG. He's got a ton of followers, so pretty cool. But yeah, just go there. Now, I was reading what you wrote me, and then we had messaged for a little bit before you said I do. And you know, talk about that journey. You were in wrestling, and then you were not in wrestling, and then you saw some cool video and you're like, oh, I want to do that again. And you started your new journey. And now chairman of Maryland Wrestling, chairman partners in Cliff Team, program director, club I mean, the rest is legendary. So, you know, tell us kind of your road to where you are today.
Yeah, in a condensed version, you know, this is it's been a crazy ride. I mean, this has all really taken place in the last. It's only been 15 years, and to me, that's a small period of time. I'm 44 years old, so 15 years getting back into wrestling when I was 20. You know, I was obviously pretty late coming back to the game, but you know, from 29 to now, 15 years, it's not a large period of time. So I was in wrestling in high school for a couple years, and I only did it to stay in shape for running. I was a runner, and I was decent, but I got some calls from colleges to run. I ended up going to UMass Lowell in Massachusetts, University of Massachusetts, and I actually wrestled my first year, did cross country, and did track, outdoor track, my first year of college, and it was just too much. And so I ended up just dropping the wrestling aspect because I ultimately went to college for track and running. And unfortunately, the wrestling program was dropped literally 2 years after I was involved. And so I was like sort of thankful I was involved I stuck with running at that point, qualified for the NCAAs in the half mile, went on after college, ran some semi-professional stuff. And you're right, I was on YouTube. I don't even know why I was on YouTube looking at wrestling, and I saw Kerry Kolat, and I'm like, man, I literally used to watch this guy in high school, and I wasn't a big high school wrestler at that time, but when I saw Kolat in high school, and I think I saw him in some Penn State match. This is when he was with Penn State. When I was in high school watching, like, I would love to wrestle like this guy. He's so dynamic, so explosive. He's fluid, and you just could tell he was on another level than everybody else. The fact that he lost that, I think the match I saw, he lost. But I said to myself, I'm like, this guy is an athlete. He even though he lost to this other person that doesn't quite look like an athlete. Like, I want to be an athlete like that. And so for some reason, around 2004, I saw a clip of him, and I'm like, I want to get back into wrestling. And long story short, I ended up entering a tournament. I was still running, so I ran like 80 miles one week, lost like 20 pounds, entered a tournament, and won my first match. And then I'm like, I can't wrestle anymore. It was just, it's a different game. You know, I could run all day, but wrestling is just a different type of energy that you're utilizing. And So I was hooked. I slowly began letting go of running. You know, at that time I was 29 years old, still relatively young for an athlete. And I said to myself, I want to see how far I can take wrestling, because I just wrestled a match after 10 years of not being on the mat. I felt it felt awesome, and it was something, you know, wrestling. There's always something in wrestling that's pulling at you to go back out there, and I think it's just being competitive. You know, running for me was always super competitive with myself, and I think people who run understand that. They're always trying to beat their own times and not worrying about anybody else. You know, wrestling, you gotta not worry about somebody, but you're preparing to beat somebody else. And I think that's what really captivated me to come back to wrestling, because I wanted to prepare myself and compete at the highest level.
Yeah,
And
and so you reach out, right? And you come to, where was it, Maryland?
yeah, Maryland, Carrie, and I didn't know this. So the whole thing is sort of coincidental that it happened. My ex-girlfriend at the time lived in Maryland, and she was going to school down there, and we were deciding whether or not she would move to Boston or I would move down to Maryland. And so this was all happening around this. It's such a transformational time in my life. It's crazy that it happened, but decided to go to Maryland. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start looking for places where I can, you know, do my athletic stuff. I'm gonna wind out my career in Maryland, my competitive career in Maryland. So I actually started exploring track coaches in wrestling. You know, I was still on that fence, teetering. And Matt Centrowitz, he was at the American University. He was held some world record in the 5,000 meters, and I reached out to him. He was super accommodative to me and said I could come train with him. But ironically, I found out Terry Kolat was down in Maryland, like literally 15 minutes away from the school where my girlfriend was going to school, and I'm like, holy crap. So I got in contact with Terry. I told Terry that I want to come train, and I think he said at the time, okay, we're training tomorrow. And I said, well, I'm in right now. I said, I might be there in about a year and a half. And he's like, okay, whatever. And then later on, talking to Carrie about it, you know, he's amazing storyteller. He would tell the story better than me. But later, he's like, I didn't know who this guy was. He didn't think I was ever going to show up. But maybe 9 or 10 months later, I was down there and I contacted him and I said, I'm here. I want to come train. And sort of the rest is history. You know, Carrie, obviously, his name in itself speaks for volumes of what he does in the wrestling community, what he's done, and what he's going to do at the Naval Academy. But what he did for me is transform my life from being indecisive, because I was still teetering on running. Am I a runner or am I a wrestler? And he was just so transformational for me to have me just run through a wall. And you know, I got involved with the Maryland USA Wrestling, became the chairman. I'm no longer the chairman, by the way. But that opportunity itself just opened tons of doors, because I got to work with Kyle Snyder, got to work with Helen before she went off, got to work with tons of amazing athletes in Maryland before I moved on. And it's opened just a plethora of doors for me. And I'm so grateful for those opportunities and being able to work with Carrie in those times. And I said it's transcendental, and part of what we're going to talk about today is just that, you know, transcending different barriers in wrestling. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to it, but that's
Yeah, and I mean, you know, obviously right now, big push for the women, which rightfully so. You're an Asian American. there's Latin Americans, Afro Americans, white Americans, whatever. But I know there has been a lot of barriers, that have had to kind of be driven through the process. And I know one of the biggest things that you have close to your heart is discussing transcending barriers through wrestling. And what did you mean when you sent me that? And expand on that statement, transcend barriers through wrestling.
Yeah, it's something that I think about constantly, because I always felt personally for myself, before you can create awareness in anything, you have to have your own self-awareness. And so sometimes, in order to make people aware of, whether it's women's wrestling, whether it's the equality within wrestling across the racial divides, you have to bring awareness to somebody individually before they can see the bigger picture. And for me, I've always felt like I'm always like knocking on the door, trying to push down a barrier. And one of them was getting into the wrestling world. People didn't like the fact that I was a non-wrestler and I'm suddenly, part of the Kolat Club, part of Maryland USA Wrestling, part of, whatever it might be. I'm sure it still happens today that, people are just have a problem with me coming from a non-wrestling background and being in these sort of positions that I'm so grateful. Again, I'm so grateful for them. But being in these positions or being at the right time in the right place. But it wasn't easy, like a lot of that stuff is knocking down barriers and being present in the moment, as we've said. And I feel like, with a lot of the stuff that's going on right now, obviously we can't get on the wrestling mat and we can't refine our skills as we really want to, or keep our conditioning up like we want to. The big issues right now is bringing awareness to women's wrestling and ensuring there's inclusiveness within the wrestling community, among our ethnic backgrounds in our groups. And I always felt like I never really saw anything different. I never, because wrestling is wrestling. We all speak the same language per se. You could go across the world and show somebody a double leg, and they're gonna understand. You don't even have to tell them what you're doing. You just do it, and they understand what you're doing. And that's our language within the wrestling community. But for some reason in this country, it just gets convoluted with, with gender and race. And so I think bringing awareness that, look, we're all in the same group of people. We're all in the wrestling community. We're all speaking the same language. Let's work together. Let's pull it together and create awareness. To bring up our women's wrestling that's emerging. I mean, last week was the first week that the NCAA let the girls be involved with wrestling. So that was an amazing time, I think, and I don't think it got enough recognition and bring awareness to the masses in the U.S.
And
So,
one thing that I see, like if I walk into a club, there's many different races, two different genders, sorry. But many different races, blacks, whites, Hispanics, girls, boys, kids, adults. And when they all get on the mat, nobody cares. They just wrestle. But it seems like outside the mat, outside of the gym, in the world, people care. And I don't know. And it used to be on the mat too, right? I've heard a lot of girls say that they would get on the mat and boys would forfeit, or boys' parents would say, no, you're not wrestling her. And now, thank God, on the mat, that doesn't, at least I haven't heard that it goes on anymore. They're welcome to the gyms and other wrestlers. So why can't it be that way outside the doors too,
And it should. Again, we're all speaking the universal language of wrestling. And it's unfortunate that that stuff happens, but you know, when something like that happens, bringing awareness to it that it is happening, create culture and reinventing our mindset about it. Okay, it happened. We have to be able to, you know, change the culture of why is this number one, why is it happening? People are ignorant, people are not accepting. It's gonna happen, you know. But what will happen is more people will see and understand, look, girls are here, they belong here. And then the few, the very few, that's because it's going to become fewer people that are against it. You know, it will eventually just emerge and be just as prominent as men's wrestling, in my opinion.
Now, I know you're deeply rooted into Beat the Streets. Um, and I know kind of the concept of Beat the Streets. It's kind of, I'm sure it's wrestling's version of like the community centers, the Y, right? The youth programs. How deep do they go into these diverse communities to throw a mat down, to offer opportunities to those kids? I know there's coaches around the country that do it. I know there's clubs that do it, but how deeply rooted does Beat the Street get into saying, we're going to go into Little Italy in Boston, or Chinatown in New York City, or somewhere in Queens, you know, in the Spanish neighborhoods, or, you know, in the Afro American? Do they do things like that? Do they have weekend projects where they're throwing mats down and saying, come try this?
Yeah, that's a good point about Beat the Streets was created, and their mission is to provide opportunities to urban youth. That doesn't necessarily mean families. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a predominant race. It just means they're in the center of a city where wrestling just doesn't exist. And for some reason, I'm not sure why that is. That wrestling wasn't as prominent in urban cities. But in DC, it's interesting in DC because DC is only like a 10-mile by 10-mile square in the middle of Virginia and Maryland. And so you can be in Maryland in 15 minutes, and then you can be in Virginia in 15 minutes. And then on the other side of DC, it's the Potomac River goes into the Chesapeake Bay. So it's a interesting dichotomy there. Number one, we have Maryland, we have Virginia, and then DC. DC has many enclaves, just like you were talking about in Boston, many different enclaves. And Gary Fitzpatrick, man, he has worked so tirelessly for the program. He is the director of the entire organization, but he's worked tirelessly and set up various training sites to expose urban youth in DC to wrestling. They've never seen wrestling before. And this past winter actually was the first year that we were, well, not the first year, the first major push, I should say. The first major push where we had 4 different locations. And I was going to Columbia Heights, I was going to Anacostia, I was going down to 8th Street corridor. So different area pockets in DC. I could hit all three or four of them literally within a 10-minute draw. Now with rush hour, it was pretty challenging, but I could be at each one within 10 minutes. And so it was really cool to be able to be in downtown DC, place where I absolutely love, and then reach out to these kids who have never seen wrestling of all backgrounds. We're talking about every background you can think of: rich, poor, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, everything you can imagine. But they were thirsty and hungry to learn. I mean, it was something something that reminds me maybe of myself when I was getting back into wrestling, even as a competitive athlete, because I sometimes think we forget about our own enthusiasm that we have. And I think it's important to always look back and bring that out of other people, share those experiences. And again, we're talking about the language of wrestling. So what better opportunity than sharing wrestling with these kids who have never seen before. Um, so we really didn't target any specific um, area of DC or pocket. It ended up being that we tried to get in many various schools, and these four schools were the ones that we were able to get into. Um, Donate wrestling mats, donate equipment, provide our time on a volunteer basis. Um, it was just an amazing time, and unfortunately, the pandemic cut the season a little bit short. But I'm excited to get back into it. So,
And that's only going to feed the programs. You're going to be able to get young kids that are getting ready to go off into high school or might already be there and never tried the sport, right?
yeah, and we're starting at the grassroots level first. So when hopefully soon, wrestling will become a sanctioned sport in public schools. And so when those kids move up from elementary and middle, they have a program to go to. And it just doesn't stop. The worst thing that could possibly happen to anybody is, they start wrestling at a young age and then they don't have the opportunity to keep pursuing it. And
off in different directions. And, it says a lot what you're saying. I know you saw Skylar Grote on yesterday, right?
Yep.
And the one thing that she spoke about is trying to make it where little girls don't have to experience what girls her age experienced at 8, 9, 10, 12, and she said it wasn't even like the kids that are like nanny, nanny, boo, boo, or I'm not touching you, you're a girl. It was more the nasty comments that would come out of the stands and from around the mats that almost forced her to quit the sport on multiple occasions. And she's like, I love the sport. My father was in the sport, and she wanted little girls out there to know, like, hey, we're here, we're fighting for you, and it's getting better, and just know it,
That's amazing, and that's the way it should be. We're all on a wrestling mat to learn to wrestle, to have fun, and it's no different if you're a boy, you're a girl, you're black, you're white, you're Asian. It's no different. And I've personally, I've never seen that because I haven't been that close to, I guess, that where girls are being singled out like that. And I'm not gonna ever let that happen.
I mean, I have a kid that's 14 and a kid's 11. Yeah, you hear kids when you're down there, they're like, ooh, you gotta wrestle a girl. But that doesn't bother these girls. That's not what bothers them. They get that. That's just kids being kids, middle school, high school, kids being kids. They make fun of each other, they tease each other. It's when you hear things coming out of the stands like, she said she used to hear parents say, pull her hair, yank her hat off. Like certain things that were like, dude, come on. Or,
singling them out.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is no good. And I mean, I understand if you're a coach that's always had boys and you have a concern about intermingling girls at a young age because fear of what that can cause in your room, and you have actual thought process that way, I think people more understand that than just to come out and say, no, I don't like girls in wrestling, period. That's a whole different thing, because now, okay, if you don't like it with girls and boys together, now it's being sanctioned.
Right.
Now you can coach them separately, and occasionally you can have your intramural whatever, because that's good for and healthy for them. But now you can bring a full girls team in, and you don't have to worry about the cause and effect that you think happens or may happen when you have them together. I mean, the girls will come out and say, Sissy Blasone was like, I couldn't have the same camaraderie on a boys team that I do on a girls team, because I'm not in the locker room with them. I'm not in this area with them. I'm not showering with them, and this is all big because those are the areas where you talk shit, or you become people, you become friendly. You're not talking on the mat. You're not doing, it's the off the mat stuff that you do together that she just wasn't involved in. I wasn't there. So it was things like that. I guess, affect what they're doing. So, well, it looks like it's working. 28 states so far, right? 23 more to go.
There's challenges along the way for everything, but the girls definitely, it's long overdue. They face those challenges, and that stuff needs to stop. Like, and you'll talk to some girls, and they want to train with guys because they don't have anybody else. But it's emerging. The sport's emerging, so the more it continues to grow, the more sanctioned at the high school level. The NCAA has it designated as an emerging sport. There's going to be way more opportunities for them, and it's going to become more widespread, accepting to the masses, and it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So,
Yeah, I think that's what, like they'll say, look, if I want to wrestle, I had to wrestle boys because there's only so many opportunities I can wrestle a girl. There's not enough girls out there for me to wrestle at the time. So yeah, if I'm happy that I wrestled boys, it benefited me. It made me who I am today. But if I had a full 14 team lineup, 28 team lineup, 30 whatever team lineup, then I probably would have never wrestled a boy because I had enough to wrestle,
yeah, and that's where we are. It's happening in, like you said, in 28 different states. I was fortunate to speak at the DC Board of Education panel on making it mandatory sport in the district. This was about 5 years ago, and I had to educate myself beyond just my own personal experience, which was very limited. I must say, I did wrestle a girl when I was in high school, and it was interesting. It wasn't much different. It was just the fact that my friends were like, "Oh, you got to wrestle a girl." I'm like, "Okay, whatever. I'll wrestle her."
Yeah. Don't touch her there. Don't touch her here. Be careful with this. Watch your left. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I hear my kids. I hear the kids on the mat. You hear them and you laugh because you remember being 14, 13.
Right.
Like, you would say the same thing. And, but no, it's good to walk into a room now and you see the camaraderie. You see the difference. You don't really see the separation. At least I have not experienced that in my short time. So, it's been fun, and hopefully all these platforms are working. Getting to know these girls are working. For me, it's crazy. I didn't know how many amazing women we have in wrestling, and now they're coming onto the show, and I get to talk to them, and I get to meet them, and now I'm like, wow, I want to watch them. And it's just, for me, I'm becoming such a huge fan as well. And I think that's a lot of what this whole argument has been was, yeah, you don't want to put us on a fight card because we're not popular. Why are we not popular? Because you haven't made us popular. You haven't taken one of us and brought us mainstream to say, this is, Morales or Salice or Ember Brutale or any of these girls. I have them all written down. Out of the way because you haven't brought them there. So now, if
you're talking about it when live, it's just creating the narrative. You're doing bringing in everybody, all walks of life, all backgrounds, so people can understand. Wrestling is so inclusive and it has so many varieties of people. And if there's a narrative only pointed at one style, one gender, then yeah, of course the masses aren't going to see it, and that it definitely angers people, and it bothers me, angers me to see that women's wrestling is not on the same platform and have the same type of exposure that our men have. And
what did the UFC do? They had a girl. She was pretty tough. Girls were not as diverse in the martial arts at the time. They were young girls coming up, but they took her. She was on every commercial, everywhere, every place, every advertising panel. And little girls started going, oh, I want to be a badass like that, right? Just like little boys out there looking up to these UFC fighters. And now we've got these girls that are just so well-rounded, but now you see a girl's card, you're like, ooh, I want to see Nama Yunus versus Andrade or whatever it is, right? And you know the names and they bring eyes. So I think that's part of, like the How She Wrestles campaign and the Wrestle Like a Girl campaign, is that market us. We've got some cool girls out there. Seth Gross. I was blessed to be on with Seth Gross and Jack Mueller and Jude Swisher and Jacob Hughley yesterday with the home mat. I shouted them out right there. You see, there's a little panel down there. So Seth is obviously, involved in women's wrestling with his fiance, but all of them are like, wait till you see this new wave of girls that are coming up. They're just fire. And let's start knowing about them now, just like we know about these kids, like McGowan and Busakis when they were in 8th grade. And now we know them now. Or Alexis Lyles and Emma Brutile when they were at Fargo kicking butt. Why don't we know about them, right? Market them.
It's about number one, it is about the marketing aspect and not marketing based off of what's gonna put money in your pocket. I think in the wrestling world, people are always, or not always, but people are opportunists. They're looking to make money off of wrestling. And 10, 15 years ago, when I first started getting involved with wrestling, everybody said, well, there's no money in wrestling. Now there's money. There's donors everywhere. There's people willing to give money because wrestling has saved their life. But marketing shouldn't always rely on the base and be based on the number of clicks that somebody's getting. A girl works just as a boy, and girls should not depend on, a girl's exposure should not depend on, how many clicks it's going to bring to your platform. I mean, to me, that's just asinine thinking. And
well, let's be honest, the girl is going to get you more clicks than the boy. So yes, it is. If I pull up some of the women wrestling social media platforms and I pull up some of the men, man, the girls are typically, unless you pull up like a Jack Mueller, a Seth Gross, Yanni Demopoulos, a NATO, whatever, those guys are the top of the top. But for the most part, thousands and thousands of followers, but it's all wrestlers. The idea is, I'm not a UFC fighter. I'm not an MMA fighter. I'm not even a wrestler, but I'm somebody that fell in love with it through my kid, or with UFC, watching it since we used to have to ride our bicycles to Blockbuster Video and rent it. Right? I'm aging myself now, right? So now what happened to MMA? People watched it. You remember when we were like 18 years old and people were all wanting to learn how to do Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and all these gyms were opening up of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And then all of a sudden it turned into, Jiu-Jitsu, whatever that other, the throwing, whatever sport it is, and judo. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they were all MMA gyms. And now they're teaching everything, boxing, and there's cages. And the same thing. It started with just going, wow, those guys are fighting to the death. Yeah. But nobody does that anymore. They're not like, you die. So yeah, I think it's been awesome to see. Just like I said, in my small time, it's only been 2.5 years or whatever it's been for me. But I've obviously fell in love with it, and I want everyone to know about it. And I'm so happy that more people are talking about it. And
yeah, I think it's, especially now when there's no really coverage of any events happening right now, now's the time. The iron's hot, and you strike, and it's happening. So I'd say the last thing I'd say about, being inclusive to women's wrestling and being accepting of other races in wrestling. Again, it's a universal language, and just bringing awareness that you have different people, different types of people. Just because you're a man, a woman, you're black, white, Asian, Latino, it doesn't mean you're gonna treat it differently. Nobody wants to be treated differently. And so we all speak the same language. We all learn pretty much the same way. And just being accepting and reinventing, I think, our mindset. And that's going to happen through these larger platforms that are willing to expose women's wrestling, you know? So I think it's coming.
Yeah, and what's great about wrestling is you're not too small, you're not too big. There's a weight class for you. Like
Right.
there's someone in the room for you. We can work with you.
Exactly.
Not me personally, but the sport. I can't work with you because I don't know shit, but I know I know I can get you in touch with the right people now at my platform. But it's been awesome. Yeah, Tanner commented marketing women's wrestling is absolutely critical. The wave for this is swelling for sure. And you guys all heard Tanner on my show. I mean, he was very passionate about his thoughts, and I learned a lot from talking to him, and I use some of the things that he taught me during that interview. I use and I elaborate on in other interviews. So having guys like that on so I can learn, because if I don't know what I don't know. So once I learn what I should know, I can help pass the information along, right? Like I had no idea it was the number one platform to create first generation wrestlers. I mean, college students.
Right. Right.
Now I tell everybody that. It's like he's imprinted it, he's embedded it in my mind. Like everyone I talk to now, I'm like, did you know what it does? Like the only thing you need to know is this. Like what else do I need to tell you other than this? Like
it's amazing. Number one, I'm a first generation wrestler. I've seen it personally. I've worked with all his athletes at the Nova Wrestling. And it's amazing what you can do once you expose these kids to wrestling and where they'll take it, you know, with a little guidance, you know, because at the end of the day, this is just, it's beyond the skill. It's beyond the athleticism that we're driving, and the technique. You know, I love technique. I love watching wrestling, but for me, my most satisfying moments in wrestling, and I talked to Andy Martinez of Arrow Wrestling. He was on your show, I think. I told him my most memorable moments they weren't the ones where somebody was getting their hand raised in the middle of a mat or holding up a Fargo national title stop sign. My most memorable moments were the ones where wrestling changed their life off the mat. You know, they became fighters off the mat, whether they're dealing with personal stuff in their life, school stuff, stuff with their parents, stuff with their friends. Like those, when somebody can overcome those things, those are the most memorable moments for me in wrestling. And you can always share those things beyond, you know, you can only talk about your hand being raised so many times. And why you don't want your athletes talking about that. You want your athletes talking about improving, you know?
Yeah. And I can't, a lot of times when I have these top wrestlers on, I'll ask them most memorable match, most memorable moment, one match you want back or whatever. I've yet to have somebody say on their most memorable match or memorable moment, oh, it's the one I teched a guy. It's the one I pinned a guy. It's the one I won the NCAAs. It's never. They say, gosh, I had this one guy, he was ranked 4th and he hit this on me and I was so close, but that match drove me to get so, you know, like it was never, it's always that match. It's not it's the state championship. I came in 2nd place, or it's the little things like that series going off. I don't know why. I didn't even talk to her.
Yeah, no, those are the moments that create the champion. And you go off the mat and then you reflect about it, and maybe you deal with stuff that happened in it, and then you come back and work 10 times harder and change your mindset about things, and that's when you get your hand raised. But it all snowballed from that one moment of either losing or dealing with something a lot bigger than wrestling, you know, and
That's awesome. Well, you ready for my 10 questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So Freddy's or Five Guys?
Five Guys.
All right. The track or the mat?
Ooh, the mat. For sure.
MOD or Little Italian Pizza?
MOD.
5 miles or 7 minutes?
Ooh, 7 minutes. No, 5 miles anymore.
Coyote Grill or Anita's?
Coyote Grill.
Track spikes or wrestling shoes?
Wrestling shoes.
Glory Days or Wing Zone?
Wing Zone.
Freestyle or Greco?
Freestyle. I love Greco, but freestyle's my number one.
Fago de Chao or Texas de Brazil?
Ooh. Hey, Brazil.
All right, so a live go or a rumble, like a Saturday thing where you guys do like a 4-hour rumble or a live go, or go off to a Saturday IBT?
I'd say a live go.
Awesome. I like it. That's what I hear from a lot of people. It's different at like a weekend tournament, but I think a 1-day tournament versus a 1-day live go.
That's a whole nother topic. And I heard Tanner, you and Tanner, touch upon it, but like you get a lot more out of one of those than sitting in a gym all day and get 2 or 3 matches.
Yeah, and I heard,
especially at the youth level.
Coach Brandon Scott, you always heard him at club practice over at CFWA. He's always like, the hell with that Saturday tournament. You need to be here. You're going to get to wrestle 50 times, 4 hours. You're going to get more. And you've got people in the room that are state qualifiers, state champions, beast, be here, better wrestling. So, he's a pretty good coach. So people listen.
Listen.
Yeah, man, this has been an absolute honor, man. I really appreciate you coming on and
for having me.
Really and just doing this. It's been really dope. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks again.
And enjoy the park, enjoy the coffee. And then I know that after me, are you doing Zoom with Tanner?
No, probably not. He's on vacation. I'm gonna catch him on vacation. So I don't want to be jealous of him. Like, I'm in the park, but he's gonna be on a beach probably. I don't want to get jealous about it.
Nice. Well, good for him. It seems like a really hard worker, so I'm sure he deserves a break.
Sure.
Awesome. Hey, man, thank you so much. And again, anything I can do for you, which might not be much, but hit me up.
No, you too. We'll talk soon.